Hey everyone, welcome to another tier maker video on That Franchise Guy. Today we are going to be ranking 121 cornerbacks in the NFL, so buckle up. Before we do get started, if you could take just a second to hit that like button, it really does help me out, pushes this video out to other NFL fans like you, get more views for the channel. I really appreciate it. Also, make sure you're subscribed for more tier maker videos and NFL draft content just around the corner here. Now, as we rank these guys, of course, I'm familiar with these guys' games. I watch every game. I'm familiar with their film. So that will be a part of this. But of course, you want to consider production and statistics as well. And with the cornerback position, it's just a little more difficult to sort through these things because there's a lot more stats that probably mean a little bit less than, say, edge rushers with pressures and pass rush win rate. And it's also just a very high variance position as well. So I wanted to provide a little bit of extra context in terms of some of the production and scores that we're going to look at here in this video. If you don't care, just fast forward. I'll timestamp when we start ranking these guys, but I think this extra context is important. And I've been playing around with some stats this morning for a few hours, and you can see just a few stats, courtesy of PFF Premium, a free shout out for them if you want really the best place to get good stats, good data, good tracking for all things NFL. PFF Premium is going to be really your best bet. But yeah, I'm really excited about these kind of scores that I've come up with here to try to paint a better picture of cornerback stats. And excited to hear your feedback on these as well, because I really came up with these this morning, but I think they work really well. So there's three that I'm really going to be showing a lot of in this video and referring to, and I wanted to take a second to explain what these are. And the first one we're going to highlight here is what I'm calling stat score, or just raw stat score. This to me is the best ability to kind of capture their coverage ability in terms of yardage and targets and completion percentage. And this is going to take your targets per snap, so how often you're on the field that you're getting targeted. Then it's going to take your completion percentage when targeted, so how many receptions are you giving up when targeted, and then your yardage per reception allowed. So are you allowing significant yardage after the catch or at the catch, or are you limiting things to short gains? So these are just kind of the corner's shutdown ability. It's not factoring in pass breakups or interceptions, which are important, of course, but are much more tied to, was it a bad throw, or did you get out physical by the receiver? There's so many more things that go into actual ball production. This is just, is the guy limiting yardage and being shut down? So I really like the stat score. We do have your PFF coverage grade, which I do want to include. I will say it is their most high variance and least projective grade that they give, the coverage grade. Like, I like their blocking grades and pass rush grades a lot more than the coverage grades, but it does factor in some extra, eyes on every play analysis, more film related grades there on top of a lot of other stats and stuff that they will pump into the PFF coverage grade. Then you've got the TFG score is what I'm calling this. And this one is going to be kind of a cumulative look that's going to take the stat score, it's going to take the PFF coverage grade, and then it's also going to factor in some of that ball production. And the stat I wanted to use for that is going to be this one right here, your forced incompletion percentage. So that's going to just tie into how often you're disrupting the catch at the catch point. And then that TFG score also factors in penalties a little bit as well. Because, if you're cheating, getting penalized, it needs to show up and get dinged. It's a skill to not hold all the time, so it does factor that in. And then this, of course, is your mean score, which is the average of the three. So that's what I'm sorting these as a base from, but we'll be playing around with these. I am going to post this spreadsheet right here to Patreon for any all-star level Patreon subscribers and above, just to give you guys a little bit of something to play around with and see how these guys are playing this year. So there's just a little extra added context there. Let's go ahead and get into it. And then with that said, I do need to break down the tiers just so we're all clear here. the top ones are a little more self-explanatory. You got your elite corners. You truly stand out from your true number ones. But all of these guys, if you're lucky, one of these guys in these top 2 tiers will be your best corner. And then you have another tier that I think is necessary here. These are really good corners that probably aren't good enough to be like true, quote unquote, shutdown number ones. And the term shutdown in the modern NFL takes on a different term, but you get what I'm saying. This tier are guys that if he's a 1A or a 1B, you're fine with it. The best example I can think of with this, and we'll just slot them in, the best example of this is like the Tampa Bay Bucks, Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean. If either of these guys were a true number one in a different situation, I don't know if I love that, but I really like these guys as a duo. So that's like my best example of that tier. We'll see if we sort other guys in there. Then we have guys that are more ascending young players or players with smaller sample size who are right now, good perimeter starters, being a number 2 corner, that have upside to continue getting better and be a number 1, but I would not say are number 1s right now. Then you have your true number 2s. These are guys that I would say are probably locked in more as just a good number 2 corner. Example there is the first guy on our list there, like an Adoree Jackson, who's been in the league for a long time. He's been a really good starter, but never really been a great player. Then you have your slot guys. I'm just sorting them by great slot corners and good slot corners. And then you have high upside prospects, guys that are going to be very high variance players, but you hope someday can become number 2s and number 1s. I would say high upside prospects have a fighter's chance of becoming a number 1 someday, whereas good upside prospects, probably more of a number 2 someday. Then you have the ideally not starting / decent slot guy tier. These are guys that are probably getting a lot of playing time right now that might be a number 2 for your team, but this is me saying your team probably should look to upgrade. That guy's not consistent enough, or just kind of your average starting slot, kind of a dime a dozen slot guy. I figured that was a good tier to lump those guys in with as well. And then below that is the why the hell is this guy even playing tier. Probably not going to be a ton of guys in that tier, but there were some names on this list where going through these depth charts, I was like, man, they should really look to upgrade there. So anyway, let's get into it. We've already started with a few of these guys. Next up, we have Ahkello Witherspoon, who's having a really fun season for the Rams. I'm actually curious where his kind of grades come in here in our scores. A little bit lower, but he has had some really big splash plays, and anything in this 62 to like 75. These are going to be a lot of number 2 corners, guys that are going to have a little bit more weekly variance, but are good enough to be starters. Those are your real number 2s, and Witherspoon, as long as he's healthy, has really been that guy. So I like Witherspoon in there as a true number 2. AJ Terrell, to me, a true number 1. Hasn't quite followed up with that. I think it was his second season where he was like elite of the elite. Hasn't quite been able to sustain that level, but definitely a number 1. Super physical, lanky corner. Caleb Evans for the Minnesota Vikings. A good upside prospect, a lot of speed, but really kind of leaky in coverage week to week. He's gotten some starts. He's had games where he's not so much starting. They don't even know really what to do with a Caleb Evans, but he does have traits. He's interesting. And then I would probably lump Alontae Taylor in there with a Caleb Evans. Both these guys came into the league together. I had very similar grades on both of those guys, not to be too attached to my draft grades, but 2 guys just learning the position, theoretically have like really good physical traits to maybe be put up here. But when you see the down in, down out inconsistency from these types of players, you just worry at a certain point that that's ever going to be consistent enough to be an elite guy. So I'm glad they fed these 2 guys together. They're very similar. And then I would even say Ambry Thomas, still in that prospect group. A year ahead of the curve there and has had some frustrating games for the Niners, but he's been playing more lately. I still like Ambry Thomas, very inconsistent, probably shouldn't be starting, but I think he in time could carve out to be a number 2 in this league. Okay, Amik Robertson, I'm going to put him, unfortunately, in the ideally not starting / decent slot guy. I think he is like the ideal 4th cornerback to have on your roster because he can play from the slot, he can play outside. Really good ball skills, has had some splashes for the Raiders. But, you know, where is he in his... you know, he's grading out okay this year. And I do also want to take a look at the PFF grades as well as we did in the Edge video. So, you know, maybe I'm second guessing this one, and that's why these videos are so fun to kind of learn on the fly here. But yeah, he's been banged up the last couple of weeks. It's not the biggest sample size. I like Amik Robertson. I'd be happy to be wrong about saying he's kind of a CB4 type. Or just a starting slot guy, but I think ideally you're looking to upgrade there from him. Marlon Humphrey now, and I am sorting these guys inside these tiers, by the way. Marlon Humphrey, he's tough because he's missed a lot of time. When he plays, he's one of the 3 or 4 best corners in the league. I have a feeling he's going to end up as my #1, true #1. But in terms of the coverage, you know, when you look at his grades, I know he's towards the top here. You know, a 21st. His stat score is elite. But yeah, I think true #1 is good for Marlon Humphrey. Which I think once we see how few corners end up in the elite group, it will make a little bit more sense. Then we got Antonio Hamilton. I'm not going to be so harsh to put him in the why the hell is this guy playing tier, but he's certainly only starting because he's on the Arizona Cardinals. I do think he can play, and I think he's probably a tick behind Amik Robertson, but you know he'll make some splash plays. He's played a lot of snaps for the Cardinals over the years, but ideally shouldn't be a starter. Then we got Asante Samuel Jr. I'm a huge Asante fan. How did Samuel come out in the scores here? Very much in that kind of CB2 tier, which makes sense. Incredible ball skills. Love his energy. Love his just burst to the ball. You know, in an off-zone system, he just thrives. But he does, at times, get a little over-aggressive. You know, can get out physical at the catch point. And that's going to show some coverage inconsistencies. Like, there's a reason his coverage, PFF coverage, and ball, like these include the TFG score and the PFF coverage grade. These include more like ball skills stuff, and then your stat score is like the raw coverage numbers. That makes a ton of sense for Asante Samuel that it would come out that way because he will give up some yardage, but he'll make up for it with some plays on the ball. So he's a really good #2. I think I'd take him over Adoree Jackson. It's tight, but he might even be, now that I say that, he might even be up here. You know what? Let's put him up here because I think if the Chargers had a guy like Carlton Davis opposite of Asante Samuel or Jamel Dean, I think he could be in this tier. We just haven't really seen that. We were hoping J.C. Jackson was going to be that guy, and he just wasn't. So I feel pretty good about that. I love me some Asante Samuel Jr. Was a big fan of him in that draft class. Then we got Deonte Banks. I love Deonte Banks. Talk about someone I was super high on coming out. He has had incredible flash plays as a rookie for the Giants. You know, I think these tiers get, you almost need to like color code these the same because technically I would say Adoree's probably a better player than Deonte Banks, but Banks, he's got the length, he's got the chance to really be a true #1 someday. So I think that's more exciting than some of these guys, but I will color code them the same. But either way, man, Deonte Banks is trending in the right direction. They look like they found a stud with that pick. Jacorian Bennett, very much a good upside prospect. Just because he's younger, will put him over Ambry Thomas, but I wasn't the biggest fan of Bennett coming out. I didn't love his coverage technique, and he has been really struggling when he's been out there. I don't even know that he is eligible for the scores that I've put together because I don't think he's played enough. But you can see the coverage grade very poor. Let's see, does he have a Yeah, dude, he's way down here. So he just has not stepped into the league and been effective, kind of as I expected from him. In fact, give me Ambry Thomas over him at this point. Then we got Deron Bland. Very fascinating player, man. He, I don't even want to slot him in there anywhere yet because we got to do some digging on this one. Breakout rookie year last year, 5th round pick out of Fresno. And then this year he's following it up with like a historic year with the pick 6s. Now, the thing with interception is that's just one play out of maybe 60 snaps that you'll take that day. So Bland, to very little surprise, the PFF coverage grade, which has a heavy weight towards interceptions, is significantly higher than his stat score. In fact, his stat score is going to put him down 73rd in the NFL in terms of just raw coverage production. And you put him behind that pass rush, and that's where you get him really able to get the ball. Very similar to Trayvon Diggs in a lot of ways, though I think he's a little bit stickier in coverage. He's a tough one. He's a really tough one. I think for now, I think just true number 2 is where you put Deron Bland. If he, I just have a hard time. Maybe it's the draft pedigree, and maybe that's a flawed way of thinking, but you know, I just don't know that he's ever going to be like a lockdown number 1 corner, but he's definitely shown enough to be a good starter for you. So I'm going to put him in there, and I think I would still take Adoree Jackson, though it's close. Then we got Andrew Booth. He's probably towards the top of this group. He's had a really hard time staying healthy, and if he was fully healthy, it would have been a 1st round pick. I would say he's a high upside prospect because he's got all the traits, really good film in college, and it's not like he's shown to be bad when he's played for the Vikings, but given the sample size, given the injury stuff, it's definitely trending towards him never really being like a, you know, a number 1 corner. But could he get healthy and become a number 2 guy, similar to like what Ahkello Witherspoon has been through throughout his career, where he's been hurt all the time, but eventually stays healthy and the traits come through? Absolutely. But for now, I'm going to put him at the top of this tier. Okay, Bradley Roby. I think I would just say, ideally, he's not starting. He's not quite good enough at this point in his career to be a true number 2. But a veteran that knows what he's doing, that's probably lost a half a step. He's been okay for the Eagles this year. Okay, Brian Branch. I'm just going to put Branch as a great slot-only guy. And, of course, there's going to be a debate with Lions fans. Some might say he's a safety. That was the debate coming out. Where does Branch come in on this list? He is kind of smack dab in the middle. You know, very good stat production, which is impressive for a slot guy. He's an incredible run defender as well. I mean, I think this is perfect. He is one of the best slot corners in the NFL as a rookie. It's remarkably impressive. He's not an outside guy, so you can't put him in any of these. And I don't think he's a safety either. So I really think this is who Brian Branch is. He was a high floor, high floor, limited position player coming out, especially if he's a slot guy. Now, if he became a safety, that narrative might change, but I really think he might just be a slot corner. It's really what he played at Alabama. It's how Detroit is using him, and I don't see them really shaking it up at this point moving forward. So, I mean, very much a guy that has lived up to his draft pedigree. Then we got Bryce Hall, who's very interesting because I think if he had a larger sample size, we'd say he's a true number 2. He doesn't have the speed to really be a high-end, like, number 1 guy ever. But this is a guy that's been in the league for a while. But because of the sample size, I would say he's still, in a lot of ways, a prospect. But Bryce Hall is someone that at some point is going to be starting for someone. He could have been starting for the Jets if they didn't land DJ Reed in free agency. But I really think he is destined to be a good perimeter starter for somebody someday. If you're watching this video, I'm sure you are well aware of what Underdog Fantasy and their pick'em contests are. But I do just want to say we got an absolute stinker of a Thursday night football game with Raiders and Chargers without Justin Herbert tonight. I know myself, the only way I'm going to be interested in watching that game is with an underdog lineup. So if you think now is the time to sign up for Underdog Fantasy, if you have not already, use promo code TFG at sign up. They'll match up to $100 on your first deposit. That's like all of next season's worth of pick'em contests. and you'll support my channel in the process. So go check it out. Underdog Fantasy, promo code TFG. Let's get back to it. Then we got Byron Murphy. He's a tough one because he plays in a lot of spots. They put a lot of pressure on him there in Minnesota. Really could be anywhere in this group. Because he can play outside, I think I would put him in this tier. If we pull up his kind of coverage scores, though, has not been the best this year. He hasn't been truly horrible. So he's not exactly the best fit in like a bump and run blitz heavy system. I think he's a little bit better in space, just because he is a smaller corner. He's not the fastest corner either, but he's very quick. He's very tough. I think he could be a great slot corner. But really, I would just say he's kind of a solid number 2, nothing more, nothing less. Very similar with Cameron Sutton here, who's at this point in time played slot. He's played outside. Let's look up where Sutton's scores are. Both these are very similar types of players that signed into the NFC North. Sutton has been much better in coverage this year, but I think stylistically these guys are fairly similar. So I would put Sutton probably right here above Witherspoon, and Byron Murphy as just a good number 2 corner, but another guy that could be a great slot, but because he can play outside, I think you bump him up to saying he could be a number 2. Tyson Campbell, to me, he goes up here with like Asante Samuel. I think if he is paired with, and this is probably another case where we need to grab his running mate, because I think they actually do have a good setup in Jacksonville, Darius Williams. Let's grab him as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about Darius. But you put a really good number 2, opposite of Tyson Campbell. You're very happy with that as your 1-2 punch. And Campbell's a very good man coverage player, very technically sound, has some size. If you look up Tyson Campbell's scores here, I would imagine they're pretty good. Not as good as you would think, but was incredible last year. If this was, again, coverage scores are very year to year. If this was last year, if we want to pull up like his PFF grade last year, bam, was like incredible last year, 81.2. So he's probably towards the bottom of this tier, but I still like Tyson Campbell. I still believe in Tyson Campbell. And then Darius Williams has been legitimately one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. I don't even need to type his name in. I just need to search, by mean score here and go to the top. The yardage hasn't necessarily been there, but he's been really breaking up a lot of passes. I think if we were to pull up the overall like pass breakups on the season, he's up there. Yeah, he's second in the league in pass breakups. So yeah, he's been really impressive, and they're going at him a lot too. So big fan of Darius Williams. In fact, I would prefer him probably to Jamel Dean. Then we got Cam Smith. Very obviously just a prospect. The debate is high upside or good upside. I didn't think Cam Smith was an incredible prospect. I thought he was a very good prospect. I thought he was very loose in coverage when you talk about route squeeze, which is, being that elastic band where the second the receiver begins his break and begins that separation, can you snap back on with agility and just kind of the mental processing to pair the legs with the mind. I didn't love that from Cam Smith. So I still think he's a good upside prospect. Dolphins fans will probably disagree with me and say he could be a number 1 someday. I think he'd be a really good number 2, maybe like a Deron Bland type of guy. But I don't see like a true number 1 in Cam Smith, and would love to be wrong about that. Then we got Charvarius Ward. Dude, Charvarius Ward's been incredible this year. He's a true number 1, but not just that. I mean, talk about someone that you don't need to sort his name to find him. There he is, 19th in mean score. A little bit lower in terms of the PFF coverage grade, the stat score. So that's saying he has probably actually given up some bigger plays. We can double check that through the stats. But yeah, the ball production, 16 pass breakups, forced incompletion percentage of 21%, despite getting targeted 80 times. That's a perfect example of why coverage grades are such high variance. Like eventually you're going to give up a long of 60 yards, which he's given up. One of the longer completions this year. But Ward's one of these guys that just when you watch the Niners play, you feel his presence and his ability to get in guys' face and take guys out of the play with his press coverage that is some of the best in the league is so perfect for that Niners system because their pass rush is so good. Maybe Ward isn't the best coverage player 4 seconds into the play, but he's one of the best coverage players in the league 1 and 2 seconds into the place because he's so up in guys' face. So definitely deserves to be a true number 1. He is for the Niners, and it has paid dividends for them. Same with Chidobe Awuzie. He's dealt with some injuries as of late. I do think he's a number 1 though when fully healthy. A couple of years ago, he had one of the best seasons in the league. This year, I don't even think, is he even going to show up here? He is. He's been solid. He's been very good. I think he's a low-end 1. You could make an argument that he should be there with like Carlton Davis, but I think he's a little bit more athletic and sticky down the field than a Carlton Davis. I also think he's a more heady zone player than Carlton Davis. So I'm going to put Awuzie as a true number 1, though he's very borderline. But I think the main discrepancy is we've seen Awuzie be a 1 when he doesn't have one of these guys next to him, if that makes sense. Awuzie has done it alone. So I like him up there. Then we've got Kobe Durant, very fascinating player. I'm going to put him in this tier probably between a Caleb Evans and Alontae Taylor. And Durant has missed a lot of time this year. I like Durant. He's played some from the slot. He's played outside. I compared him to Darius Williams, which was so fitting that he went to the Rams. Yeah, he's just had a very up and down season. He's been much better as of late. 5 pass breakups on the season, has not been credited with a touchdown allowed, had the 3 picks last year. Trying to carve out himself as a true starter in the NFL. I think you'd maybe even put him up a little bit higher after looking at that page. Put him right there. But still has a lot of work to do. Then we got Dallas Flowers. And a lot of people are probably like, Dallas who? Dallas Flowers was balling out for the Indianapolis Colts before he went down for the season this year. Really was one of the better corners in the first month of football. 3 pass breakups. A little bit of struggles in run defense. Was not great last year. He's going to be a year 3 undrafted free agent type. Really difficult to know what to do with him. I think you put him in a good upside prospect right now. Probably behind like Bryce Hall. But keep an eye on this player when he comes back next year. If he's starting, he's got the traits. He's got the length. Was a small school guy coming out. The Colts love taking those gambles on athleticism and size, and he looked like he was paying off before the injury. So definitely someone worth talking about here. Then we got Dane Jackson. I would say right here with he's like a young Bradley Roby. Ideally, he probably shouldn't be starting. He's like a really good CB4, can play from the slot. He's had to play for the Bills because of a lot of injuries, and he's been fine. And I like Dane Jackson, but he is extremely streaky. Ideally, he's not a starter or he's a slot guy. And then Ronald Darby conveniently comes up as well. Ronald Darby and Bradley Roby, not only are their names incredibly difficult to keep track of, but their career paths where they've bounced from team to team, their size and play style, they're good sticky man corners. They're very similar. Darby's a little bit better in zone. Roby's a little bit better in man. But yeah, you tell me who you'd rather have. I think Roby's, I'm already getting him confused. I think Roby has been a little bit more consistent over the last 3 years or so than Darby, who's been a lot more injured. But, very good CB4s and good depth to have that are kind of low-end 2s in a lot of ways, but we don't have a tier for that. Then we got D. Alford, another kind of no-name guy. I think he's a good slot player. Someone that we should probably pull up the stats on him. Came into the league undrafted last year out of Tuscaloosa, Tennessee, and he's really carved out a good season for the Falcons. He's made Clark Phillips unnecessary for them. And Clark Phillips, let's do him while we're, you know, on this track here. Clark Phillips has just recently got back into the lineup, and he's actually playing outside for the Falcons. So that goes to show you just how good D. Alford has been there. I think someday we could look at him and say he's a great slot guy, but at the very least, he's a good slot corner. And then Clark Phillips is tough. You know, he's not a high upside prospect. That's why he went in the 4th round. But I think you'd put him right here with like Kobe Durant, someone that you expect has good potential to be a good or even great slot corner someday. Very heady player. Liked him coming out of Utah, but just has to show it more at the next level. Then Amador Lenore, we got to look him up too, because he's been streaky. I know that. Very streaky. If you look at him game to game, he's had like elite weeks, and then he's had weeks where he's given up 100 yards. What do the scores say about Lenore? I would imagine he averages out somewhere in the middle, and he does. Really came onto the scene late last season, was huge for them in the playoffs, and for the most part, that playmaking as a number 2 has followed. So I think you put him here with these types of players. I think I prefer him to Akello Witherspoon. But that's close. Both guys very similar in that same division there. Then we got Desmond King. I mean, he's still a good slot corner. I don't think he's better in coverage than D. Alford, so I'll put him behind him. But King hasn't played much because Tavier Thomas here, who we should also rank in the good slot tier, has been a really good slot for the Texans. He's like a borderline great slot. Not quite a great coverage player, but a really physical, high energy, fast run defender from the slot. But Desmond King has had to step in with Thomas getting hurt lately, and has reminded us that he can play too. He had a what should have been forced fumble return for a touchdown in that game against Denver that got called off on some BS. So he's been good since he stepped back in. I still think he's a solid slot. All right, this is one a lot of people have been waiting for. Devon Witherspoon. We all love Spoon. He's one of the most likable prospects in this draft, and when you look at his scores, he is really up there, man. He's good in coverage. He's been great in terms of ball production and the run support. I mean, the sky is really the limit for this guy. He reminds me a lot of Jair Alexander. Like, I think this is still the right tier for him, but he's already playing his way up to being a true number 1. Like, I want to acknowledge that. The sample size is still fairly small. I'm super tempted, though, to put him up here. I really, really am. Man, let's just take a peek at the PFF profile and see if it changes our mind at all. 10 pass breakups, 1 interception. Yardage been pretty consistent. Man, he's even got the pass rushing. You know what? Let's do it, man. Do I see him slowing down? No. He was a blue chip prospect and has been every bit of that since the second he stepped on the field. So let's do it. Let's have some fun. Put Devon Witherspoon in as a true number 1. Then we got DJ Reed. To me, is like the top of this tier. Can be a 1 of 2 in a great duo, and he's going to have, of course, we might as well bang out Sauce Gardner as an elite corner while we're talking about these guys. But I don't think DJ Reed has shown on his own to be a true number 1, even if his stats kind of say they are. You've got this guy in Sauce Gardner. Now, what's cool here is if you just kind of sort these guys, you'll find Sauce Gardner has some of the best overall scores out there. Just shut down, breaks balls up when they throw his way. Second year in a row, he's just been the best corner in the NFL, hands down. Like, I don't even think it's really a debate right now. Sauce Gardner is number 1. When you have that guy opposite of you, you're going to get targeted a lot. You're going to probably give up a little bit of extra yardage. But DJ Reed, for the second year in a row, is like a top 10 corner in the NFL. Could you take him out of that and put him on the Falcons or sorry, on the Cardinals and expect that? I'm not so sure. But DJ Reed is nasty in his own right. Those Jets corners, it's by far the best cornerback duo in the NFL. Then we got Dante Jackson, true number 2, towards the bottom end, has a lot of bad plays, can make some splash plays, very much belongs in this group. Emmanuel Forbes, at this point, do I see him being a number 1 guy? No. But I do think he's at the top of the good upside prospect. I think Forbes is very much in the mold of like a Trayvon Diggs, where if he reaches his development and becomes what you hope Emmanuel Forbes will be, you're not expecting a down in, down out great coverage player. And by the way, Emmanuel Forbes has the worst stat score in the NFL. He does have some good ball production that saves some things, but that's exactly what I'm talking about with Emmanuel Forbes. The stats there are backing that up. But at his best, he can be a player that is a number 2, that sees a little bit of extra targets share, and has the incredible ball skills and acceleration to trigger and get some key interceptions and stuff. Similar to like a Deron Bland as well in a lot of ways, but I just don't think he's got the size and stickiness in coverage to be a number 1 someday. All right, Fabian Moreau, we got to look up how he's scoring out. He's actually been very solid for the Broncos just across the board ever since they went away from my dude Damari Mathis and went to Moreau. That defense has really settled in. And he's an interesting guy where he's played a lot of snaps in the NFL. He started, people gave up on him because he was a 3rd-round pick that was really bad to start his career. But I thought he outplayed his 54 coverage grade for the Giants last year, 7 pass breakups. He's playing very well for Denver now. I really think, this is a guy that he's 6 foot, 200 pounds, 4.3 speed. I think he's developed over the years to the point that he's at least a number 2. In fact, I think he's more reliable than Dante Jackson, who, if we look up Dante Jackson, where is he at this year? He's actually having a pretty good year by Dante Jackson standards. So I'll give Dante the nod there, but shout out to Fabian Moreau. He's turned into, I think, an adequate number 2 option for you. Then you got Cordale Flott. Let's see how Cordale Flott's doing. I honestly haven't noticed him a ton watching the Giants. Sounds about right. Very up and down. Some great games, some really bad games. The tackling inconsistency is tough because he plays in the slot and he's 175 pounds. A very unique player coming out, and really still is. I would say he is down here in the ideally probably shouldn't be starting, maybe a decent slot guy, maybe someday can be more than that, but I think that's a good spot for Cordale Flott. Christian Fulton to me is kind of the definition of a number 2, towards the bottom end, and I know Fulton's he is just very up and down. This year has certainly not been very good for him. He's trending in the wrong direction as well. I think you'd probably actually have Fabian Moreau over Christian Fulton at this point, but I still believe in his technique to be just a solid number 2, or at least a low-end number 2. Garrett Williams belongs in with this group right here. I think I'm going to put him probably behind Dallas Flowers, but really fun 3rd-round pick out of Syracuse. Excellent off-zone corner. Really heady player, played in that system at Syracuse, and Arizona runs that same kind of Fangio-inspired quarters-heavy system. He's been very good since he stepped in for the Cardinals. I really like his upside in the same way that I like Forbes and Cam Smith to maybe become a really good number 2 someday. I think that was a really good pick as long as he can stay healthy. He just fell in the draft because he wasn't able to start the season. He was coming off ACL injury or something. I think I talked myself actually into put him in above Hall and Dallas Flowers. Then we got Christian Gonzalez. He goes right there with Deonte Banks. Small sample size, was balling out to start the year and then tragically got hurt. But he has lived up to his draft pedigree. Really has the traits to be a 1 someday. C.J. Henderson, he almost belongs in the why the hell is this guy still playing tier. Was a brutal draft pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You can see the coverage scores there. He is really towards the bottom and has been that way since the second he's been in the league. The Jags gave up on this guy after his first year. He was a top 10 pick. The Jags gave up on him. And myself and most people were applauding the Panthers for trading a third-round pick for C.J. Henderson. But that just goes right there with the long list of mistakes that front office has made. He has truly been arguably the worst corner in the NFL over the last 3 years because he's playing so much, right? I've always said the worst players in the NFL aren't the guys that stink and get benched or that aren't playing. It's the guys that are actively hurting their team, and that's C.J. Henderson. So he definitely belongs in the why the hell is this guy still playing tier. Trey Herndon, to me, is a good slot corner. I think I would slightly prefer D. Alford because of the athleticism, but Trey Herndon has carved out a very nice role in what is an underrated secondary, right? You don't think of the Jags having, a 1A, 1B situation and a really good slot corner, but that's what they've had this year. Mike Hilton, I think, is still a great slot corner. He's had his ups and downs this year if we look at his coverage scores. But it seems he's actually evened out lately. I know he started slow, but let's just see if he's had some hot games lately. But yeah, Hilton, one of the more physical slot corners in the league. Oh yeah, there you go. He started slow, but has been very steady the last few weeks. Not a lot of ball production, but the run defense has come back along. So definitely belongs as one of the premium slot corners in the NFL yet again. Nate Hobbs. Definitely need to visit the PFF profile just to see where he's been playing. Nate Hobbs is one of the more underrated players that we're going to talk about today. He has been playing in the slot for Las Vegas this year and has been very steady. If we take a look at his snaps by position, he has played mostly slot corner, but about a fifth of his snaps on the outside. And that's because I know he stepped outside last year, and in his rookie year was honestly one of the better slot corners in the entire league. And last year, stepping outside, his grades came down. Love his physicality against the run. I think Nate Hobbs is a great slot corner, but he's also can play outside, so he's tough. Honestly, I think because like Byron Murphy is in here, for example, or like Cam Sutton. We said very similar things. If you're a great slot corner, but you can also play outside, I think that provides a little extra value for you. I think I'd put Nate Hobbs like right here after Cam Sutton. Very similar player. Yeah, I think that's a good spot for Hobbs. He's a 2. If he's your second best corner, I think you're cool with it. Next up, we have Isaiah Oliver. Very good, underrated slot corner. Does struggle to stay on the field, which is why I'd put him behind Trey Herndon. But it's been a good pickup for the Niners. Christian Izien, a guy a lot of people are going to say, who? He's been an undrafted free agent that's been playing for Tampa. He's made some splash plays against the run. He's been a decent slot guy for them. Don't know if he's got a whole lot more upside than that, but needed to be on the list. Jack Jones. Now, he is a fascinating player. We got to visit his guy. The Raiders have had all of these guys that we feel the need to like do some extra research on because all these guys have been rotating, moving all over the place. I don't know, man. Jack Jones burst onto the scene with some interceptions early for the Patriots. Got into some trouble this summer. The Patriots released him, and he just hasn't been a good coverage player. I didn't know if his play was sustainable because it was a lot of like reading the QB's eyes and like breaking on these kind of floaters to the outside. And his down-to-down coverage consistency just isn't very good. I think I'd put him down here. Ideally, he's not starting. I don't know if he's quite a why the hell is he playing because he's still young. In NFL terms, he's like a 26-year-old year 2 player. But yeah, Jack Jones ideally should not be starting Las Vegas. Jair Alexander is a true number 1. I think the debate would be between Jair and Marlon Humphrey. Very similar deals here where both these guys have missed a lot of time lately. And they're a different flavor. You know, I think the one thing with Jair is the poor guy doesn't get to play any man coverage because he's in Green Bay. And that's, you know, he to me is still maybe the best corner in the NFL in terms of like, give me a guy to just play bump and run man coverage. Like if you put him on like the Vikings with like a blitz heavy system or like Pittsburgh or something like that, I would love him. But he's a good off zone corner, but I don't think he's an elite one. I think I'd take, this is so tough. It really is tough. I think I'd take Marlon over Jair, but it is extremely tight between those guys. You know, Jair is just a year removed from an all-pro season, but Marlon's that type of dude too. Pick your poison with those guys. Kind of, you know, Marlon's probably not the coverage player he is, but I think he's a little bit more durable at this point. Although, is he? I mean, how many games have these guys played compared to each other? This is actually a very interesting debate. So Jair has played about 1,500 snaps the last 3 years, which is not good. Packers have had some rough injuries. Marlon has played a lot more than that, but he does get banged up. This is the main difference with Marlon is like the tackling and the forced fumbles have come down. He had 9 in 2020. The coverage grades, though, you can see, you know, Jair is just a little bit more sticky. It really is like, when healthy, give me Jair over Marlon. But I think with the durability at this point, I think that factors in here. Jair is a smaller guy. He loves to hit, and I think that does get him hurt sometimes. So I'll go Marlon over Jair. Tough debate. Okay, James Bradberry. He has had an interesting season. Both of these Eagles corners really, you know, he's been much more of a mediocre coverage player this year after being kind of a top 10 guy last year. I think Bradberry has turned into kind of a solid number 2 at this point. Right in this range. For benefit of the doubt, I'll put him over Sutton and Hobbs. But give me Bland over Bradberry as CB2 in that NFC North, NFC East. Jasir Taylor, I would say he's a decent slot guy, kind of similar to like Christian Izien. Probably shouldn't be starting for the Chargers, but you know, he's made some plays. J.C. Horn, I mean, I still think he has the upside to be a 1, like a Shavarius Ward, a very physical, up-in-your-face corner. It's just the dude can't stay on the field. The Panthers completely screwed up, obviously, taking Horn over Pat Surtain. But hopefully someday he can stay healthy and be a 1 for them. I still think the sample size is small enough that you can put him in that group. But please, JC, stay healthy moving forward. Okay, both of these Chiefs corners, I want to do at the same time, Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams. Because they're both like, they both play. The Chiefs secondary is very interesting. Because, you know, Snead and McDuffie kind of play everywhere. And then you got Watson has been very solid to average. And then Joshua Williams has actually played a little bit less than Watson, but has been more efficient when he's played. And the stat score for Joshua Williams is crazy high. Look at that. So when he's played, Joshua Williams has not been given up much at all. Teams just haven't been going at him. So these guys are interesting. You know, I think I do prefer Joshua Williams. I think he's just a little bit more traitsy. And I would say he's a good upside prospect, probably like right there behind like Dallas Flowers, if not a little bit ahead of him just because he's played a little more. And then Jalen Watson, I still think is still kind of a prospect. He's in year 2. He doesn't play a ton. I think I would put him probably more like here behind Alontae Taylor, who's just got a little bit more speed going for him. But both these guys, to be their 3rd and 4th corners is a lot of fun for Kansas City. Then we got Jalen Johnson. A lot of Bears fans coming to this video just to see where Jalen Johnson's going to come in. And I'm going to drop him, I think, even ahead of Devon Witherspoon right now. And I'm sure you guys have noticed this by now. Number one in pretty much every metric this year is Jalen Johnson, who's in a contract year, second-round pick, incredibly heady player. He's got great size, just perfect fit in Eberflus's defense. I really hope for the Bears' sake they pay him because, you know, it is not a coincidence that the second he kind of, because I want to say he missed a lot of time early in the year. Yeah, he missed a little bit there, 4 or 5. But I mean, he hasn't really missed that much time. But his play the last few weeks is a huge reason why the Bears have been so good. They've won 3 out of 4, and teams are targeting him. He's just not giving up anything. He's truly been an elite corner this season. I don't know that sustains. You look at the rest of his years, it's been good, but it hasn't been this good. But if you go back to last year, too, he got hot at the end of the year. I remember this Eagles game. He ended up, that was the last game on his year. He was awesome against A.J. Brown. So, you know, he's really emerging. The durability is a question mark there, but he's going to get a boatload of money this offseason. He knows it. I just hope the Bears pay him because he's such a good fit for them. But Jalen Johnson's been remarkable. And then we got another Jalen Jones. And I like Jalen Jones. Honestly, I'd put him in the good upside prospect. He was one of these guys in the draft that he was one of my guys. And I'm going to drop him here, I think, ahead of Jalen Watson. He was a my guy in this draft because you go through it, you watch all these cornerbacks, and it's a lot of guys like Jacorian Bennett, a Caleb Evans, Cam Smith, Emmanuel Forbes, these really athletic, traitsy corners. But you watch their tape in college, and honestly, it's just not very technically sound, and they're just not very sticky. I watch Jalen Jones, and I see a guy that is a true junior at Texas A&M who didn't test very well. He's got like 4.6 speed, but he had some of the best tape in college, and I'm glad I kind of stood by his tape a lot. I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on Jalen Jones. I was like, this guy, I think, can be almost like a James Bradbury someday, like a really sticky, just smart corner. And he's had to play for Indianapolis. In fact, I liked him better than Darius Rush, who they ended up taking and cutting. And he's had to play, and he's been very solid. I don't know if he's eligible in terms of snap count here. Let's see, though, if he comes up. He does. He's just been very solid. He's been a 2 for them as a rookie, as a 7th round rookie. I really like that pick, and maybe it's confirmation bias, but he could be a really good starter for them someday. Then we got Jeff Okudah. He's a number 2. Just in terms of, consistency, it's not incredible. I feel like he's been very solid. I would expect that he comes in, a little bit below average. The stat score is solid. He's on the bottom end of it, though. He's right there with like Christian Fulton in terms of like good, technically sound man corner. Just not a very athletically gifted guy, and that's held him back. Then we got Jerry Jacobs. Honestly, I would put him in the ideally not starting, but he does start for the Lions. I think I'd put him here with like Amik Robertson. I mean, I'm going to imagine he's pretty low on this list. It's pretty, below average-ish. Sounds about right. He's a physical player. He's fine, but ideally, I don't think has the traits to be a starter. J.C. Jackson, he's tough. He's really tough. He's someone that we should probably visit the profile here because, he's been all over the place, right? He's like 2 years removed from being an elite corner. Last year was injured. This year started with the Chargers, got cut. We go to 2023. With New England, he's just been very up and down. He's given up a lot of yardage. I feel like he's had some splash plays in there when I've watched the Patriots. Whew, man. Honestly, might need to be in this group. But I think for now, I'm going to be a little bit more conservative and leave him with like the Roby and Darbys of the world. But he is trending towards this group fast. He's been rough. Jonathan Jones is a really good player. He's a number 2. Has struggled to stay healthy this year, but I do like him when he's healthy. I think I'd put him up here, honestly, probably between Bradbury and Cam Sutton. Very fast, good man-man corner. Underrated player in a lot of ways. Jordan Lewis, he's been their slot guy, right? Like, I like Jordan Lewis. I think he's very solid. I just want to confirm that he's been their slot guy because I know they can move those guys around. Yeah, he's been their slot corner. He's a good player. I mean, he's had a rough year in coverage, but it's because, you know, they'd rather go with Jordan Lewis than Deron Bland and Stephon Gilmore. So I'm okay with that. I think he's a better coverage player than his total yardage is indicating there. But maybe after seeing that, I'd drop him below like Isaiah Oliver. Julius Brents, definitely one of the better prospects on this list. I think I'm going to put him ahead of Garrett Williams and below Cam Smith, just kind of following suit with my draft rankings with that group. I don't think we've seen enough to really change my opinion on those guys. I know Forbes has had some bad games in there, but that's not a huge surprise. Kyer Elam, I mean, he's a complete wild card here. I still think he's a prospect, but he's down there now with like Jacorian Bennett, Ambry Thomas, guys that, I mean, they got to show something, right? I think you'd even put him below those two at this point. Kendall Fuller, he's a good number 2. Pretty self-explanatory there. You know, not the biggest guy, not the fastest guy, just a heady, smart player. I think I'll put him probably ahead of Bradbury at this point, but below Deron Bland. Darion Kendrick, he's made some plays this year. I'll give him that, but just not a lot of traits there at all. He is not fast, and he is one of the easiest corners to get on like double moves. And we saw the Ravens really go after Kendrick in terms of like him being over aggressive with his match rules, and he's got some issues as a coverage player. He is starting for the Rams. Ideally, he shouldn't be. Kenny Moore, great slot player. The debate here would be Kenny Moore, Mike Hilton, or Brian Branch. Where are Kenny Moore's coverage scores going to come in here? He's been very good. Not a surprise there. He had a down year last year. But if just in my heart of hearts how I'm playing this, I would take Branch, Kenny Moore, and then Mike Hilton. But these guys are some of the best slot corners in the league. Kader Coho, I would say he's a good slot corner. He has played some outside. I don't think that's where his future lies. How's Coho holding up this year? He had a fun breakout rookie year last year. He's been very solid. You know, I think good slot corner. If we can confirm that he is playing in the slot this year, which I am almost positive he is. PFF actually has him playing a little bit more outside. Well, he still plays outside, so I think this is still a good spot for him. You could certainly make an argument for him, like in the same breath as like Nate Hobbs and Cam Sutton as a guy that can step outside, but I think Coho is probably best in the slot. This feels like the right placement for him in this good. Yeah, but this is slot only. He's not slot only. He can play outside. I'm going to put him at the bottom of. I don't know. I don't categorize him as a true number 2. I don't think he's established enough as these other guys. He's almost in like good upside prospect. Like top of this tier. He's a really tough guy to sort. We're going to put him in a good upside prospect because he's still could be a really good slot player and could be a number 2 guy. So I think that's fair. He's only in year 2. K'Wan Williams hasn't been healthy this year, but I still view him as a good slot corner. He hasn't been quite in Denver what he was in San Francisco, which isn't a huge surprise. But I still think he's a good slot corner when healthy. Kyler Gordon, I would say, is a good slot corner. I think I'd put him at the top of good slot corners. Not quite ready to say he's a great one. I do love that he's playing in the slot this year, which I always felt like he was destined to be. He's fringe. He is, maybe if he finishes strong the rest of the year, could be a great slot corner. I really think that. But right now I'm going to say good on Kyler Gordon. Marshawn Lattimore, another one of these really amazing corners that just has had a harder time staying healthy as of late. Has he even played enough this year to, because this is, yeah, I mean, he's still been really good when he's played. That's not a surprise. But I know he's missed a lot of time. But I think he's still up there in terms of premium slot corners. So I feel pretty comfortable with him up there. They got Levi Wallace. He's kind of the definition of like ideally not starting. Like he's a good fourth. So we'll put him there at the top of that tier. Avonte Maddox, I still think is a great slot player. He's missed like this entire season. But he's, to me, one of the 6 to 8 best slot corners. Arguably their best cover corner now, with these other guys getting older. Marco Wilson, still would view him as a prospect. He's still very young. I would put him up here with like Ambry Thomas, a Caleb Evans. Very streaky player. He'll have really dominant plays, and then he'll have games where he gives up like 130 yards. So I'm just trying to figure out the position, but incredible athletic traits. Martin Emerson, he's a true number 2. He's a perimeter guy. He's physical, really nice coverage player. I think I'd slide him right behind Nate Hobbs and ahead of Deommodore Lenoir. Michael Carter, I think, is a good slot corner. I still don't think Michael Carter is a great slot corner. He's having another really good year, man. That's back-to-back years. It's hard to argue when you go that consistently. It is such a friendly environment. But I might not be able to argue with, whoops, that's the wrong Michael Carter. I might not be able to argue with the production here from Michael Carter, and I might have to just detach from the idea that he is, he's not the fastest guy, he's not the biggest guy, just so steady. I'm not ready to say Michael Carter's a great slot corner. I'm just not, but I'll put him at the top of the good slot corners. Jaquan McMillan. I'm so tempted to say he's a great slot guy. Broncos fans will certainly say he's a great slot guy. Now, the coverage hasn't been insane. Where he's really shown up is some of the forced fumbles and the run support. He's easily a good slot corner. I think similar to Kyler Gordon, could someday be a great slot corner. Definitely someone that a lot of people aren't familiar with. Trending towards this, but I'm not quite ready to say the undrafted kid is there yet. We still don't have any high upside prospects in use. I wonder if we'll get there. Maybe this next guy, actually. Maybe Mekhi Blackmon is our first high upside prospect. I mean, sure. Why not? Mekhi Blackmon has been a little bit slower to get on the field. The Vikings have run a kind of a 3 safety based defense. They've really only had 2 corners out there most of the time because of how unbelievably good Josh Metellus has been for them. But Mekhi Blackmon has forced his way onto the field as of late, and I was not the biggest Mekhi Blackmon fan coming out. I thought he was a little bit grabby, a little bit loose in coverage, but clearly the NFL coaching has helped him. And I mean, he's still not even like a full-time starter, but you can't really argue. I mean, teams have been trying him, and he's given up nothing. Gave up a long of 33 against Denver, but the sample size is still so small that I don't know if he's like completely shown to be like a true number 1 someday. And for that reason, I think we should probably bump him down. The dude's only played 330 snaps, but he's the first guy in this group where he's got the speed. He's shown to be physical. He's shown ball skills. He's been really good against the run, which has been a pleasant surprise. He could legitimately have number 1 upside. I'm really going back and forth on this one. I just want to leave this saying I've been very impressed by Mekhi Blackmon. Michael Jackson, kind of belongs in this ideally not starting, but he's an okay 2 on the outside. So I'll put him there behind Darby. Michael Davis, I think, is still a number 2. He's missed some time this year. Was awesome last year. I don't want to just forget about that, so I'm kind of sorting through here. I think give me Martin Emerson over Michael Davis at this point, but both these guys are fairly similar, just big physical press corners that are good number 2 perimeter guys. Marcus Jones probably should go next to Cater Coho, because Jones has also played some outside. He had like a really good game covering Devontae Adams. This goes to show you a big part of like the Patriots. The 3 top corners that we've ranked for the Patriots, Gonzalez, Jones, and Jones, have missed most of the season, and that's just really been tough for them to get through. But Marcus Jones is, a good slot corner, but I think he can play outside. So it's very similar to Cater Coho. I think I would put Coho above Jones just because it's a little bit more of a sample size, but it goes to show you, these are some of my favorite young prospects in the NFL, and I think that's fitting. Emmanuel Mosley, I'm going to drop him here for now, but he's trending towards, like, ideally he's not a starter because I just don't know if he can hold up health-wise. He's played 2 snaps this year, tore his ACL last year. I think in terms of, like, where he is when healthy, he's a number 2, but given his health, I think you got to drop him down here to ideally not a starter. I think he's kind of entered the Roby Darby category of like, can you count on them to be a number 2 because you just don't think they can hold up health-wise. I think that's very fair. I think you put him above those dudes, but that's kind of where I'm at with Mosley at this point. Greg Newsome is, I think, a 2 who could be a 1. I think I put him at the top of this group. He's also shown to be in this because he plays with Ward. But the difference here is I think Newsome could be on his own a number 1 someday. I'm just debating it because he's a better player than like some of these dudes. You know what? Well, I think that's fair. I think that's fair to put him in there because DJ Reed's in there. We were saying the same thing where, like, if he went somewhere else, he might be a number 1. He just hasn't had the opportunity to show it. I think Greg Newsome is as good of a player as these guys. He's shown it. Super sticky coverage player for the Browns. Really fun guy. Keyshawn Nixon, to me, I don't even think he's a decent slot guy, honestly. He just gets roasted in there in the slot. We saw that against the Giants on that game-losing play. The Packers have had absolutely no answers for slot corners, and he's been around the league. No one's really liked him. I think you put Keyshawn Nixon down here in terms of a guy that really is playing more than he should right now and should be benched. He's a special teamer, really, is what he is, having to play in the slot. Patrick Peterson, I originally thought I would have him in the why the hell is this guy still playing tier, but he actually ended up coming out okay in terms of the scores. He's 24th in here. His stat score is surprisingly good. He's, I think, just probably had some really ugly losses. He had a slow start to the season. And I would imagine if we pull up his PFF page, I bet he's had some pretty good games lately. Because this one really did surprise me. I thought he was just washed, and sure enough, the last 5 weeks, he's settled in and been much better. I don't know if going from left side to right side has anything to do with that. But I think he's probably still a number 2. He's towards the bottom of it. But I think I'll slide him there, like, ahead of Moreau. And Peterson was really good last year, too. So he's holding on. He's holding on by a thread. Then we got Pat Surtain. The debate here is going to be, is Pat Surtain elite enough to be in the same tier with Sauce Gardner? So let's see where Surtain comes in terms of scores. Actually not quite as remarkable this year. Last year, however, he was an elite player. He doesn't get the benefit of playing behind Sauce's, pass rush. But I think quite clearly Sauce is on a different plane of existence in terms of like he actually is a shutdown corner in 2023, which to me that needs to be in its tier of its own. I think Surtain is maybe the second best corner in the NFL. As we go here, I don't think we're going to have anybody in that elite tier with Sauce. But clearly Surtain is closer to these guys, I think, than he is to Sauce at this point. Then we got Paulson Adebo. He's been awesome this year. I'm gonna drop him here for now. Both these Saints corners, Isaac Yiadom and Paulson Adebo. Let's do these guys together. You see Adebo here at 12th in terms of mean score. The PFF loves him. He has given up a little bit more in terms of yardage, but the ball production's been incredible. A lot of pass breakups for him. And then even higher is Isaac Yiadom, who has the highest TFG score on this list. Now, he's at a smaller sample size. I think he's played about half the amount of snaps as the rest of these guys. But his production's been just stupid good. And Yiadom is very similar to like a Fabian Moreau, where he was a talented third-round pick, I think, bounced around, wasn't great early, but if he's found a home, I could buy it. The sample size is still extremely small, but you have to take note there. And I'm going to drop him. He's almost a prospect, honestly, in terms of the small sample. Like Moreau, he had all of last year to show that he was a solid player for the Giants. Yiadom, it's like completely out of nowhere. So he's a prospect in the sense of sample size. Very difficult guy to kind of rank here. So I think I'd put him like maybe here with like Bryce Hall, a guy that hasn't really played, but he's been good. I think that's probably a good spot for him. But you do want to note, like, the dude has been, when he's played this year, like right behind Sauce probably in terms of like best overall corners. It's pretty wild how good the dude's been. Yeah. So just note Isaac Yiadom. And then Paulson Adebo has just been a really good prospect. Love him coming out of Stanford. He's got the length. He's got man coverage. I think the zone stuff is coming along. I see him probably at the bottom of this tier where he's a 2 now, but I really think he has the traits. This is someone that, like, before the weird COVID year, like, very well could have been a #1 pick. He ended up falling to the 3rd round. I thought it was crazy. I had him as a top 50 player for me in that draft, and I think he's shown the upside to be potentially like a Chidobe Awuzie or a Jalen Johnson type of player. All right, we're getting there, guys. Marcus Peters, I did throw him in here. He's currently unemployed, but I still think he showed some flashes for the Raiders. I think you put him there with like Levi Wallace in terms of like he's an option, could start, but ideally shouldn't start. Then Joey Porter, you know, it's almost like we don't need the high upside prospect because the guys that could be 1s are probably already 2s. So maybe when all is said and done, we'll delete that tier. But man, Porter is nasty. He has been just nuts. They were hesitant to start him for some reason, and he's been every bit as good as advertised, especially on the Steelers there. You see the stat score there. Like, he's just not giving up any yardage, like, at all. So do you put him over Christian Gonzalez? I mean, probably, honestly, just because he's shown a little bit more. It's not of a disrespect to Christian Gonzalez, who I love, but Porter has been unbelievably good this year. Unbelievably good. The fact that the NFL let the Steelers get Joey Porter in the 2nd round blows my absolute damn mind. Like, so many draft picks come to my mind where it's like, dude, I had Banks, Gonzalez, Porter, and Witherspoon, all as top 10 players in this draft class, and some of these guys fell way too late for some reason. Really great rookie class. Jalen Ramsey is still up there. I couldn't believe what the Dolphins were able to get him for since he's been out there. You know, you think of Jalen Ramsey's, like, interceptions, right? Like, the highlight interceptions he's had since he's stepped back on the field. Well, his stat score is really good too. And remember, stat score doesn't include interception stats. This is like yardage and how often you're getting targeted. It's all on a per snap basis. He's been up there, man. He's had the interceptions. He's still one of the best run defending corners in the league. I think I'd actually say Ramsey has retaken Surtain's spot. And if he didn't have a down year last year, I think Ramsey has the best case to also be an elite corner. But I think I would put him outside of Sauce's tier. And I'm very hesitant to do that. If Ramsey had played the whole year and was playing at this level, I think he'd probably be elite. And if we did this again in 6 weeks and he keeps it up, then maybe. But I still wouldn't quite put him up there with Sauce. All right, Rasul Douglas is one of the best number 2 corners in the NFL, full stop. Has been that for Green Bay. He's been very good in Buffalo. He really is. I think him and James Bradbury are 2 of the headiest players in the league. But Bradbury's had much more of a down year. Douglas has not, really for 2 years. These guys are all very tight. But I really do think Bradbury's trending in the wrong direction. He's on the wrong side of 30. Rasul Douglas has just blown me away since he arrived in Green Bay, and I think Bills fans are very quickly realizing the player that they got. I think some people are like, ooh, a 3rd-round pick for a veteran corner that's not the fastest guy. You're maybe like, that's maybe a little steep, but the second he stepped on the field, like, you get it. All right, Tariq Woolen. He's a tough guy to know what to do with. I mean, clearly he's a number 2. I think he's still young enough with the freaky length, the freaky speed to say maybe could be a 1. So Woolen has ironically been better in coverage this year than he was last year, but he's not getting the interceptions. The big holdup with Tariq Woolen is he might be the worst run defender out of the 121 players that we are ranking in this video. This is a guy that very clearly was a converted wide receiver and was probably just a little bit focused on the coverage aspect of things. He's been benched this year because of his tackling. He was horrible as a tackler last year. Was a huge issue against the Niners in that playoff game. He is a liability in terms of run defense that you wouldn't say about most corners. He's got to get that cleaned up. But, you know, the dude's got traits. I'll give him that. He's had a very polarizing season. All right, then we got Roger McCreary. How's McCreary doing this year? How is Mr. Roger McCreary doing? Very, as expected, Roger McCreary. I mean, he has been very much as advertised since the second he came into the league as a really technically sound man corner with decent traits. I think I put him right behind... I think I put him ahead of Kelly Witherspoon, behind Diamador Lenore. He's a 2. He can play in the slot as well, similar to like Cam Sutton and those guys, Nate Hobbs. But I like Roger McCreary. Never going to be a 1. He's just not big enough, not fast enough, but he has been very solid. All right, Darius Slay. Or just Slay, as he made it very clear he likes to be called. You know, he's still having a good year. He's not having that all-pro type year he had last year. I still think Slay's a number 1. And I'm going to put him ahead of Awuzie, but below Ward. I still think he's a 1, but clearly, you know, he's getting up there in age. He's trending in the wrong direction. But I still trust him to be a number 1. I do. Sean Murphy-Bunting. I like Murphy-Bunting. Misses a lot of time. And how's he playing this year? I feel like he's been pretty good. Kind of coming in average. I think Murphy-Bunting's a 2. And I'm going to put him... I'll put him right there. Between Witherspoon and Murphy. He's a good player. Good traits. Not the stickiest, most consistent coverage player, but I like Murphy-Bunting. There's some health stuff there, too, which makes sense why he's next to Witherspoon, who has had a hard time staying healthy, too. All right, then we have L'Jarius Sneed. And Sneed to me is a 1. And I'm going to put him a little bit ahead of Charvarius Ward. Now, they ask a lot of Sneed, and he shows up like 20th on here, so still very impressive. I and the TFG score is really good there. But from a coverage perspective, he hasn't quite been like what all these guys are, but his versatility, the way he blitzes and, has really the size and speed to match up with anybody. He's a really impressive player. And I think I'm going to readjust Witherspoon behind Shavarius Ward a little bit there. But yeah, I mean, he's a 1. And then I wanted to do McDuffie as well, who he's tough. He's been really steady. I'm going to drop him there for now. He hasn't really had any elite performances other than this one against Chicago, but that's Chicago, week 3. Other than that, he's pretty steadily given up 2-3 receptions that Miami really tried to go after him, and he held up okay. But because he plays so much in the slot, he is going to give some up. It's just a really difficult position to be like shut down in. So his stats are a little bit challenging. I think he's up here with like Samuel and Tyson Campbell, Jamel Dean, Greg Newsome. He can be a 1 of 2. Like if you had Trent McDuffie and Jamel Dean, I think you're totally happy with that as a 1A, 1B punch, So I think this is really where he belongs. He's been incredibly underrated for the Chiefs as well. And I'm going to put him actually 1 above Dean, but behind Greg Newsome. Then we got Benjamin St-Juste. Interesting player. He's a big-bodied guy that can play from the slot and the outside. He's really quick. He's a sure tackler. I think he's right there with like Kader Kohu and Marcus Jones. Still kind of a prospect. He could be a good slot, but he maybe could be a 2 someday, but he's not a 2 now. I think he's right in this group. I'm going to put him below Marcus Jones. I think he's a better player than Forbes right now, so I think that's a good spot for St-Juste. And then we got Star Thomas, one of my favorite undrafted free agents this year, if not my overall favorite. He was a 4th-round grade for me. My pro comp was Kobe Durant. I think they maybe even came out of the same school, but very similar profile. I can't quite put him over like Andrew Booth, Taylor, Jalen Jones, maybe even Marco Wilson, a Caleb Evans. It's probably more like here, maybe even at the bottom of this tier, just because he is undrafted, very unproven, been very up and down for the Cardinals. But I do think he can be something like a Darius. Darius Williams, you got to remember, was an undrafted free agent too. Very similar play style. But I think nothing else, he could be a good slot guy. So I'll leave him there in the upside prospect, the good upside prospect group. Brandon Stevens has been a 2. He's fascinating. He's very fascinating. He's had a great year. When you look at his scores and stuff, he's putting up number 2 numbers, but his trajectory, his growth has been really impressive. And this is a guy with the length, the speed, was drafted as a very traits-based prospect, 6'1", 215. He's got speed. Theoretically has the upside to be a 1 someday. So I think putting him with like a Debo and Woolen is probably fair. I still just don't feel great about like having these 3 guys where they are. And I think I'm going to redo this to be legit shot to be a 1. And then I'm going to add, and maybe I'm doing too much here, but I just added some new tiers here. Because I really think there's a gap here between these guys who are more like mid to lower end 2s that have theoretical number 1 traits that I probably wouldn't ever bet on to really reach that upside, whether it's, they're a little bit behind the 8 ball or just, gut feeling, whatever. Like, I just don't think these guys are in the same group there. And then it's also weird to have like Tariq Woolen behind like Christian Fulton. So we can now have like low end number 2s, which I think starts with probably Patrick Peterson. So we'll drop these guys down. Even Dante Jackson, honestly, is too week to week. And then we can, with that, no, I don't think we need to bump anybody up. I think that makes a lot more sense of this group here. With Reek Woolen still being tough to know exactly what to do with. But I'm trying to get this right, and I think you guys appreciate the process here. And I feel a lot better about that, working through this thing. All right, Stephon Gilmore. I mean, he's still up there with like Darius Slay, Chidobe Awuzie. I think that's a pretty easy spot for him. I mean, he's been awesome for the Cowboys. Where's Gilmore come in here? Yeah, I mean, right next to Slay, really. I think we probably can flip that right there. But he's a 1, if not, can be a 1 of 2. But he's been really impressive. I thought he was awesome for Indy last year, too. And I like it. All right. Steven Nelson is actually still a high-end number 2. I think I would put him probably, honestly, probably above Cam Sutton. I mean, people don't really realize how good Steven Nelson is because he's, been in the league. He's 32 years old or whatever, 31. He's been on Houston. But this has kind of been Steven Nelson since he went to the Texans. Since he left Pittsburgh, he's just been like kind of one of the better number 2 corners in the entire league, honestly. Probably even ahead of Jonathan Jones. So underrated player, Steven Nelson, for Houston. And then Derek Stingley is going to come up here. I think I'd put Stingley ahead of Banks and behind Gonzalez. Some of the injury stuff is a little bit concerning there. But I think he's been real special since he's come back on the field. And you got to remember, he was the number 3 overall pick. So he's trending back up in the right direction. Honestly, I think you put him over Christian Gonzalez because Gonzalez has been hurt now too. But I can't quite put him over Joey Porter, who's been just so locked down. Then Eric Stokes. Now, he's a guy that we might need that high-end prospect tier back. But I think he is at least a 2 now. Like, that works. He's really struggled to stay healthy. But first-round pick, length, speed, press coverage. If Green Bay could just wake the hell up and run a man coverage scheme, I really think Stokes and Jair Alexander could be incredible, but they just won't wake up and fire Joe Barry. They're putting these man cover corners in a zone system, and they traded away their only zone corner. Make it make sense, Green Bay. But yeah, Stokes, I think right in this group makes a ton of sense. He might get healthy and get back out there soon, so hopefully we can see that soon. Teron Johnson is still one of the better slot corners in the league. I would drop him probably ahead of Maddox and behind Mike Hilton. Cam Taylor-Britt, I'm really glad we did this because now this is starting to make a lot more sense. Cam Taylor-Britt is a 2 now with theoretical number 1 traits, but I probably wouldn't ever bet on those to turn him into a 1. But he's played really well when he's been out there and was traitsy. Like, again, got hurt. They've missed him, but I've been super impressed and have been wrong about Cam Taylor-Britt. I had like a day 3 grade on him. They took him in the 2nd round and were absolutely right about it. So he's been a stud. And then you got Trey Brown is a fun player for Seattle. Can play in the slot, can play outside. Probably, he's kind of still a prospect in a lot of ways. I think I'd put him here with like these guys that have small sample sizes that are really intriguing. Probably behind like Bryce Hall and Joshua Williams and Dallas Flowers, but I think like right there. He's made some plays, man. He's a fun player. I'd love to see him kind of continue to get a big workload, improve himself. Trayvon Diggs. I've always said Trayvon Diggs is kind of the perfect, can be a 1 of 2 because his down in, down out coverage consistency isn't great, but the ball skills are just so remarkable that if he's a guy that's, getting a lot of targets and you have a good complementary guy opposite of him like Stephon Gilmore, it's great. Now, he, of course, got hurt and Deron Bland steps in. I think I'd still rather have DJ Reed as a number 2 or a 1A, 1B, but Diggs definitely belongs in that tier. And he's shored up his coverage at least a little bit. It's not like that one mega season where he led the league in yards allowed and interceptions. It's come to meet in the middle a little bit, which I think is a more healthy middle there. Tre'Davious White, he's tough because he's missed so much time, and he hasn't even been that good when he's played. But when he was healthy just a couple years ago, he was a top 3 to 5 corner in the league. I really like Tre'Davious White. I'm going to, just out of respect for him, leave him in the true number 1 tier, but he is slipping, man. He's slipping fast. We got to see him get healthy, and really next year is a big year to like prove that he can get back to that level. Troy Hill has quietly been a pretty good slot corner for the Carolina Panthers. He's a guy that if we search here, you might be a little bit surprised, I think. Just very steady, man. He's never been the fastest player, so getting up there in age, it hasn't really hindered him too much. But yeah, Troy Hill's been a pleasant surprise for the Panthers there. They got DJ Turner, another guy that you kind of need, like theoretically has number 1 upside. I don't know that he's ever going to be a true number 1. He reminds me a lot of, and Bengals fans even remember Trey Waynes, who was, super fast, not the thickest guy, not the most like play strength or anything, so can get bodied a little bit, but also at times like his speed can work against him in terms of ability to like stop and redirect and, adjust to different routes. He's been a very polarizing rookie, similar to an Emmanuel Forbes, and I think that's probably like in most scenarios, I think DJ Turner can be a really good number 2. I would be a little bit surprised if he ever became a number 1. I think that's the NFL agrees. That's why he fell to the 2nd round. And you might say, why is Cam Taylor-Britt up here? Cam Taylor-Britt is a lot quicker. I think he has better play strength and reactionary quickness and has been more consistent when he's come into the league. So that's kind of the difference between those guys. And I also just don't think he's a number 2 now. He has theoretical number 1 traits, but I would be surprised. Now, I think I'd put him over Cam Smith. Although we just haven't seen Cam Smith play much. I had Smith slightly ahead of DJ Turner. These guys had like almost identical grades coming out. So I guess we'll stick to my draft priors there and put DJ Turner there. Tyler Hall, good slot corner for the Raiders, underrated player. They've had obviously an identity crisis because Amik Robertson is kind of a slot guy, Nate Hobbs kind of a slot guy, Tyler Hall kind of a slot guy. But I like Tyler Hall. I would put him probably right there. Getting close, we got Tyreek Stevenson. I would say he is a good prospect. Has had his ups and downs. He's settling in lately. I really liked Tyreek Stevenson as a prospect. He was my number 5 corner in this draft. If you look at his production, though, it has been a lot more polarizing. So I think this is the right spot for him. I don't think he's established himself as a good 2, but he's playing because he's a good high upside prospect. And then Carrington Valentine, man, he's been such a pleasant surprise. I loved him as a prospect. I had him as a early day 3, 3rd, 4th round type of cornerback prospect. He ends up going in the 7th round. But I really saw a lot of upside there. And I think I would put him in this group of like prospect types. I think because of the traits, I'd put him behind Edom and ahead of Bryce Hall. And to back it up a little bit, Valentine, I think, was a big reason why Green Bay felt comfortable trading Rasul Douglas because they wanted to see what he could do. But he's been extremely steady in terms of play on the field. This was a true junior coming out of Kentucky with really good testing numbers. No reason he can't be a good number 2 for Green Bay. And I think the gap between Stokes and Valentine is pretty thin, honestly, in a lot of ways, other than sample size. Then we got Denzel Ward, bumping him up to the true number ones, probably like right there at this point. Ward is still one of the freakiest damn corners in the league, but you know, why is he not in a, you know, a dominant shutdown guy behind that pass rush? He just, something from a consistency standpoint does seem to be missing from Denzel Ward at times. But still, his lockdown ability, and seeing that, I think I'd actually probably drop him a little bit here behind like Shavarius Ward. But still, gotta love Denzel Ward. He also needs to stay healthy. Then Xavier Howard, to me, he's right in this category. He is a really good high-end number 2. He is not that like all-pro guy that he once was. I think I'd put him and Bradbury is super similar. I think I'd put Bradbury over him. But that feels like a good spot for X. And then Zion McCollum is our last guy here. Interesting prospect, man. Has crazy traits, like one of the more athletic corners testing wise to ever come out. And he's been playing a little bit. I think you put him probably here like ahead of Jacorian Bennett, but you know, talk about a guy that just has not been producing. Zion McCollum, his stat score is actually not horrible. PFF, not digging what he's doing this year. So, you know, he's been very up and down. Hasn't shown to be a good number 2. But I still believe in the traits, and he's at least doing some stuff this year. So, there you have it, you guys. I actually need to take the webcam off just to give you a full look at the final 121 cornerback grades, cornerbacks ranked here. Looking at over an hour and a half on this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I mean, that was a thorough deep dive into all the corners in the NFL. If I forgot anybody, just let me know. I will try to let you know which tier I would drop them into. I think it was pretty thorough, but I'm sure I forgot someone. Otherwise, you can probably assume that if it's someone that is playing for you, you can probably assume, you know, I just view them as ideally they shouldn't be starting. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed. If you're still here and you haven't hit that like button, please do. And make sure you subscribe to let me know your feedback. I hope you enjoyed. And peace out.